Hi there, I'm Mikael. I'm a Starseed, and today I like to talk about the controversial letter that has been sent to non-dual teacher Susanne Marie. I used to be into non-duality, which is the teaching that Susanne Marie disseminates, and I used to see it as the highest truth. I no longer do. But I had a journey of about 4 years where I was intensively going to satsangs, and then after that, another 4 years where I was going a little bit less, but I was still subscribing to it. So later on, I started to see it more as a belief system. I started to see it in a way that even though an insight in the moment can be valuable, making it into a belief system can be limiting. And that's what actually happened to me because my life stagnated. So over to this letter that was sent to non-dual teacher Susanne Marie, and it's pretty angry letter. And I thought it'd be interesting to read it out and also go into Susanne Marie's reaction and just see what I intuitively pick up from it. So the letter goes, Dear Susanne Marie, I am writing to address the video that you published in 2016, where you assert that there really is no person. This message has been destructive, gaslighting, and psychologically damaging to many people who have encountered it, especially the women you taught and those who have been influenced by your ideas and are now regurgitating them to others. It is alarming that years later this harmful ideology continues to be regurgitated by some women in public forums, spreading confusion and depersonalization on a wide scale, some even calling themselves teachers. So first off, like just after these few paragraphs, a few things that I pick up is that first of all, it's not about a personal experience. So the anonymous, by the way, writer of this letter says it's spreading confusion, it's spreading depersonalization. But to who, right? So the other thing that was standing out to me, like just from the very start, is that she's attacking Susanne Marie, who seems to be a pretty moderate non-dual teacher, right? Like, and that kind of makes me wonder, did she also send this to Byron Katie, who's more radical? Did she send it to Tony Parsons? So moving on, she's saying there's nothing healthy or spiritual about erasing the sense of self or undermining personal identity in such a manipulative way. Your sadistic tone in these teachings only adds to the damage. This to me is like the most, or one of the most controversial paragraphs, where she's really seeking an ulterior motive. So that kind of tells me intuitively, like maybe the anonymous person who wrote this, maybe they're projecting something, they're projecting some of their own issues. So moving on, do you take responsibility for the psychological harm and confusion your message has caused? Are you prepared to acknowledge the real consequences of promoting ideas that destroy people's inner stability and sense of self? On one hand, this feels like more projection. On the other hand, non-dual teachings do deconstruct that personal sense of self, and there's definitely truth in that. If that happens, maybe when someone's not ready for it, like they could experience psychological states, intense psychological states. Now, I don't know, like, I mean, it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because why does the person come across this video? Maybe they were seeking for kind of letting go of that old sense of self. In the end of the day, it's just a YouTube video. You know, there's not a destructive intent behind it. Susanne Marie, she seems to be sharing what she discovered. So yeah, anyway, the writer goes on, what is your real intent behind this? If I am not a person, then what exactly am I according to you? Whatever vague definition do you assign? What were you truly thinking when you made these videos and wrote these articles? So again, you know, it feels like, you know, more projection, right? Like, what is the real intent behind this? And, you know, like, let me say, you know, about this thing about not being a person. I mean, I've followed Non-Duality quite deeply and did self-inquiry and came to a point where there's no person, right? But that was a stage for me. Like, that was a phase where I discovered that. It was one meditative state, you could say. And the way I see it now is that, you know, we're multidimensional. So kind of discovering that and seeing that as one dimension, like the dimension of, you could say, the impersonal. But it's not the only dimension. There's lots of ways to look at life. So I think that, you know, non-dualists make that exclusive and they make that the highest, you know, like for where now, you know, like years after going through the non-dual process, I could say, yeah, there also is a person, you know, it is just as true, you know, just on a different level. I kind of agree with the writer that, you know, no person can sound pretty vague. And in a way, it's one-sided. To accuse her of having ulterior motives with that and the real intentions that she's hiding, I don't really believe that. You know, and I'll come back to that actually. So I'll move on. Your words are not just misguided; they come off as a form of psychological manipulations, almost like NLP tactics aimed at undermining people's sense of self. Right. So, you know, that seems like more projection, you know. Make no mistake, these messages have real consequences. I expect you to take responsibility and clarify your position, because if you don't, you are complicit in the damage done. So this feels really heavy, and it's almost like saying, you know, you ruined my life kind of talk. But, you know, like, I wonder if, you know, because this letter itself would actually require some clarification as well, you know, because if you're just browsing YouTube, you know, like there's really no person video from Susanne Marie. It's not going to be the first video you see. Anyway, this is not a matter of abstract philosophy. It's about the mental well-being of real individuals. Sincerely Anonymous. So to summarize my main points about this, okay, one, which individuals are you talking about, right? Because it's very vague. Are you talking about yourself? Are you talking about others? Who are you talking about? Okay, two, right? Why are you attacking Susanne Marie? Like, why are you not complaining about Richard Sylvester? Or, you know, and this goes to point three, like, or did you send this to a lot of people, but you're not saying that in your letter? So those are kind of my main points and questions that I've got about this. Okay, response. She says, Dear Anonymous, there seems to be misunderstanding about the essence of spirituality, which for thousands of years has consistently pointed to the truth of emptiness. I'm not the only one pointing to this. The Buddha himself did, and many traditions have. Emptiness and form are not separate, both are divine expressions of the same whole. What I share comes from my own experience. So yeah, so my first reaction is, okay, she's sharing her own experience, which I was kind of intuiting about that first video that the anonymous writer's complaining about too, like, which is called There Really Is No Person. Okay, so continuing. Feeling like a person is not inherently a problem. For some, including myself, a deep longing arises for greater truth because the experience of separation from life, nature, and oneself can feel painful. This is often what motivates spiritual seeking, the wish to understand suffering. The sense of being a separate somebody is both unnatural and untrue. Animals, as far as we know, don't carry this construct of a separate self. Fortunately, this confusion can be resolved through sincere inquiry into what is true. Through meditation and related practices, the illusion of separate self can be seen through. Many people, including myself, can attest to this. If identifying as a person is important to you, by all means continue. No one, least of all me, is pressuring you otherwise. I did not make you watch that video. I have family and friends not interested in spirituality, and I love them just as they are. So there's a few more things that stood out to me in this first part of the response. And the first is that built into Susanne Marie's language is a view of reality in which she says what is truth and what is illusion. For example, she says that the truth is of emptiness, and she keeps coming back to an illusion of a separate self or a separate somebody. Now, the reason I think this is important is because she's saying she's describing her own experience. But if it was just someone watching her experience and they said, oh, it wasn't good for me to watch you express your experience in your video, you could kind of, okay, sorry, I needed to say that, but if it wasn't good for you, I'm sorry that, it didn't work for you, right? So that tells me that, okay, it is an experience, but there's something that is a little more than just sharing your experience in this response. So this is where I feel that the response becomes a little concerning, because even though Susanne Marie is saying that she's not pressuring the anonymous writer to subscribe to any of this, she's still saying in the response that the separate self is an illusion. So she's still conveying this, even though the person has said that, it is harmful. So the fact that she's still saying this, even though the person that she's saying it to says this is actually harmful for me, it tells me that she's got a really high confidence in her own insights. But perhaps it's so high that she's not just saying what works for the person that's before her. She's actually saying what she sees as true. So continuing with the last part of Susanne Marie's response, the longing to return home comes directly from source. It cannot be manufactured. It arises when the idea of self has run its natural course. Without this longing, it's difficult to understand what it means for the self-center to dissolve, revealing what is undivided and eternal, rather than divided and finite. This is not a concept, but a living experience, realizing that there never truly was a separate self, even when it seemed so. Individual uniqueness remains, but the self-center is filled with God, the divine or unbounded consciousness. Outwardly, life continues much the same, but inwardly the shift is profound. Unlike you, I am not on a mission. I simply share from direct experience for those drawn to listen and deepen their own realization. I believe each person has their own soul's calling and path of growth. I see myself as an integrated spiritual teacher. My work and videos attest to this. I speak not only about transcendence, but equally about embodiment and integration. half or more of my teaching is about how to feel, sense, and embrace humanness. Everyone who knows my work knows this. I have said often that transcendence and embodiment are like the two wings of a bird. Without both, one cannot fly. Realizing the formless truth and integrating it into embodied life allows true freedom. So my response is not defense, but clarification. At our core, we are empty in nature, and simultaneously we are full. Fullness itself. This is my lived experience and the foundation of what I point to. I hope this sharing brings clarity and perhaps is helpful. Warm wishes, Susanne. So what stands out to me in this, the rest of this response, is the feeling that, you know, Susanne Marie wants to help this person. That's what I feel. Because, you know, everything she says is kind of guidance. And on her website, she said that, you know, she's really empathic. So probably, you know, this is just my guess, like she's feeling the obvious suffering that the person's going through, and she's trying to kind of say helpful things that could potentially relieve the suffering. And I think that's an interesting response, you know. And you know, like, okay, let's say there's two sides. Like maybe it could work, but if non-duality is really not the path for this person, then it couldn't, and it would have better not been said in a way, because all of that affirms that there's no separate person. If you're really talking to someone with depersonalization, it might be better not to say these things, and you know, it might be better for them to have a path that is not non-dual, because you know the non-dual ideas are going to amplify suffering in that way. From what I understand about depersonalization, there's like a lot of control and agency, and non-duality and non-dual beliefs can easily trigger that and amplify that. So if someone's got something like that, I wouldn't say anything non-dual, you know, to them. And there might be other ways, you know, there's many ways to Rome, you know, if there even is one Rome, right, in the spiritual journey. There's many paths anyway. And non-duality is just one path. And it's also it's just one way of thinking. You know, it's just one belief system. This whole idea about non-separation, no separate self, life is an illusion, is just one frame to see things through. And it's definitely not the only one. It's a way for our brain to make sense of different spiritual insights, because our brain will always look for meaning, but there are uncountable other ways. So, you know, I don't believe anyone who says that they know the highest truth anyway. So I wouldn't want anyone who's got, you know, depersonalization to get stuck on non-dual ideas. So yeah, I would say, Susanne Marie, you know, like what I feel is you're trying to help, but I mean, it could help, but I'm not so sure if a response like that would help. You know, I'm sorry for all the projection, but you know, sometimes that just seems to happen, right? Doesn't it? Like people just project, and it doesn't mean that they don't have genuine concerns. And I know that, you know that as well. So yeah, so that was an interesting journey, and you know, I hope it was helpful. Okay, lots of love, and bye for now.